Welcome back to another episode of Go, Go, Grow. I have beside me a familiar face. This is my brilliant friend, my incredible colleague, and the amazing Dasha Tyshlek.
What an introduction.
No pressure. No pressure.
It's a good thing they have AC in here.
So, Dasha, for those of you who aren't in the know, is the founder of StratCraft. And she was also the co-founder of this podcast last year. So we co-founded Go, Go, Grow together as co-hosts. And since then, you now have a different podcast, Biomedical Frontiers.
That's right. Yeah, doing this podcast really helped me prepare to take on podcasting for the University of Virginia. But podcasting is a lot of work. It's so much work. I think people really underestimate when they get started. They think you just get a microphone out and brilliance comes out. But actually, for the first season, Michelle and I spent a lot of time together preparing, getting content, even trying to figure out what's the right audience, what's important to people, making it really good, and editing and promoting. So I am glad to see that Go, Go, Grow has been continuing to go, and grow, and that you have spearheaded this next season. And then I have focused on the Biomedical Frontiers as well, which is a little bit also more closely related to my industry-specific focus.
Absolutely. Well, when you and I met, of course, you are the founder of StratCraft Partners. And I was the founder of Sales Chasers, now Revenue Chasers. And you and I both have a vast expanse of skill sets, which really complemented each other. But I wanted to ask you to highlight something that you've gotten a lot of requests for help with lately. And you work with a lot of executives, a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, because they have such trouble with time management. And I'm talking executive time management, not just handling a to-do list, but as an owner of a business, an executive, how do they handle all that? So tell me a little bit about how you're focusing on that as a specific opportunity to help executives grow their company.
Yeah, it's such an important topic because time management isn't something that you're really taught in a structured way anywhere. You're not really taught it in school. You are supposed to develop it yourself. And then when you get into a professional setting, when you're working maybe as an individual contributor or in a team where you have more direction from above, your time is really kind of managed more closely by somebody else. And, it's more than just showing up on time or following a task list. As an executive, you become responsible for this extremely extensive amount of work, far beyond what any individual does. And even when you're a solopreneur executive, your scope of work and the amount of different hats that you're wearing exceeds sort of the individual level. So you really start to operate like a cog in a company. You've got many facets to what you're doing. And so time management becomes extremely important, and it is not guaranteed that you have had good coaching or training in this. You might have developed methods of your own, but some people are naturally more organized, other people less organized. They are still, even if you're not a J type of person, which is from the MBTI, ENTJ, like when you become an executive, you might be an executive for a different set of skills that you bring to the table, for your insight, for your creativity, for your leadership skills. But time management becomes just a challenge regardless of the specific skills that made you come into an executive role. And so figuring out the right set of executive management skills is just something that requires a little bit of extra learning. And it can be particularly helpful to have a coach if you're transitioning into that role for the first time.
Well, if you think about, let's say you are even a middle manager at a company, you're responsible for your action items, your meetings, and doing what your responsibilities are. You may have people that report to you and you've got to oversee them as well. But it's a lot narrower focus than, let's say you move up to a director level. Then you have maybe a couple managers under you. You move up to a VP level. You've got directors under you. You move up to C-suite. Okay, think about if you are an entrepreneur, a small business owner. Everything that everybody else is doing, that's you.
That's exactly right. And as an executive, when your time is managed really well against the goals that you're trying to achieve, against the way the work needs to flow, then your team has structure and stability, and that your time is translated into their outcomes as well. But if you are not deliberate about that time and you don't take the time to really set how your time is going to flow ahead of time and manage to it, then a million things can overwhelm your time and a million things can come in and start managing you. And then suddenly you're going to find that the crises, the thing that's on fire, the new initiative is managing your time, rather you managing the goals and your time in relation to them. So there are some resources I always recommend. I think the book 90 Days, which is about executive transitions, does kind of speak to this kind of concept of, hey, when you come in and you transition into a new role, it's mostly talking about managerial and executive roles. What do you need to kind of grasp and rethink? But I haven't really seen any one book do this time auditing technique. But this time auditing technique, I did not invent this technique, but I will, just as a kind of a matter of gravitas to why this is a great technique. When I was working at Bridgewater Associates, which is the world's largest hedge fund, founded by Ray Dalio, who's a renowned best-selling author, principals, etc., I was working in the office of the CEOs. We had two CEOs at that time. One of them, Dave McCormick, the other one is Eileen, and we had to, in our team when we're doing planning, we had to gather all the executives together and figure out how to get everybody in the room together to do strategic planning and how to get them to approve or, spearhead projects or give us direction. And it was very hard to find time across all the right executives to get them in a room together. They have international travel, client relationships, all this, other stuff they're doing that isn't the strategic planning. So we really had to dive into that was like the biggest challenge sometimes.
Being strategic about finding time to be strategic.
That exactly. People think strategic planning, like figuring out the right strategy, very complex thing. But I think sometimes the greatest challenge we would have is getting the right people in the room at the same time.
Kind of like herding cats.
To have the conversation.
And I can say that because I'm a cat lover.
But one thing that the kind of assistants to the CEOs were also responsible for, and we worked with them on some of these concepts, was doing something called a time audit. So Dave McCormick, who, by the way, was running for Pennsylvania Senate, at the time of recording, I've been watching to see if he's going to be the next senator. We'll find out. We still haven't counted all the votes. So very exciting. But, I worked with somebody on his team who did his time audit. And so this is a technique that was extremely useful to the CEOs of such a company. And that the more scope of work, actually, the more important it has become. And so because of that, I've taken that learning for myself and taught everybody I come in contact with, to the best of my ability, the concept that this is something that you can do deliberately to help yourself really understand where your time is going versus where it should be going, and then make a path to funnel it to the right activities. It's really empowering their leaders, coaching the next coming up leaders. It's figuring out the big picture of how are the pieces all moving together. Where is the company really moving? Is our momentum actually going against where we want to be going? And even answering the question of where are we going to? When you're a startup, you kind of focus on value proposition, but you don't necessarily focused on like, who are we going to be in the market, But when you are a $1 billion company or $100 million company, you might be asking like, are we trying to become the gorilla in this market? Are we kind of niche down? Are we going to expand to have more services and products? Like when the capital arrives and you have that, there's a lot of really big questions to wrestle with as well. And so that's something that is a uniquely CEO role.
Right.
But if a CEO is bogged down, they can't focus on those things. And then also getting things and impediments out of the way, because in a larger organization, there is more bureaucracy. It's just inherent. That's just how it works. And one of the things that oftentimes happens is at managerial levels, there might be policies or things that start to sort of interrupt the flow of work. And the policies were there, put in place to create process and clarity. But then at some points, they like stifle either creativity or they stifle collaboration. So one of the roles of the top executive team, including the CEO, is also to be the kind of person who can bust through poor policies and or processes that no longer work and redefine those things or empower their team to redefine those things so that the company as it grows continues to function optimally. Right. And that's a very important role, again, that really is a top level role, because when people are in management positions, they tend to be sort of in the role of needing to follow the policies, and they don't have the position to just start changing the processes at the company level. They might gripe about it, but they can't usually change that. They might not use them. that can happen. But so the CEO has this important position and their executive team also to be doing that in their respective departments as well. So very, very important.
Right. So if you break it down into the one they need to enable the doers to have the tools, the power, the clear path to be able to accomplish what they need to do, because the executives have made the strategic decisions that need to be implemented. Mm-hmm. That was kind of a simplistic breakdown of that, but you're right. Your executives need to be able to have the time available that they can assimilate all the information, put together the strategy, identify, okay, this is a roadblock. This is how the organization is going to deal with it. They're not in there removing the roadblocks, but they're identifying it, saying, okay, this is what needs to be done. So once you have that time audit, the two biggest discoveries would be...
Well, let's first talk about what is the time audit, because I don't think it's quite obvious to people what it ought to be like. Okay. So I'm going to try to kind of breeze through it quickly. Okay. You will need to open up Excel. Most likely that's the place you will do the time audit. You will need to take a look at the calendar and figure out where is time being spent, what kind of meetings, on what kind of cadences, what is these blocks of time that are called work block? Are they really happening? Do they have purpose, or are 10 people coming into the office and asking questions during that time block? So that's one side of it, kind of a tactical. You will have to figure out where the time is going, and that's going to take some time. If you're a solopreneur, it is well worth the time to do it. If you're not a solopreneur, you can have somebody help you do it, like an administrative assistant, or grab somebody who knows Excel and who can have access to your calendar to help do this. Now, on the other side of it is, how should that time be distributed? So you want to actually audit and see what has the time gone to. There is a little bit of thought that has to be given to the structuring of time. Like, it's not just meeting by meeting, but what exactly is the purpose of this time? Is it operational time? Is it sales generation time? Is it strategic planning time? Is it book writing time? CEOs sometimes write books, and that's a huge boon for their companies. Like, they need time to do that too. Is it lunchtime? Is it travel time? All of that needs to be kind of gathered and categorized thoughtfully. But then on the other side of things, you need to figure out, what would the ideal time look like? So at the end of this, you get something like, 50% of the time was spent in meetings, hopefully. it might be more like 90. And of that, 30% went to revenue generating activities. 20% went to dealing with the crisis in supply chain. 10% went to dealing with capital investors, fundraising, or maybe that's 30% that's went to that.
Yeah.
Right? And then on the other side, you have to figure out what does that actually need to look like? And that relates to what stage you're at as a company, your current goals, and your strategic plan. If you're spending 20% of your time fundraising, but your funds are running out next month, then, that is probably needs to be like 80%.
Yeah, you want to increase that.
But regardless, that check-in is very important, and it has to happen in that highly accountable, mathematical, almost graphical way where you look at the pie chart on one side and look at the pie chart on the other side and say, this is what it's supposed to be looking like. This is how my time's breakdown is supposed to look like for me to spend the right amount of effort on the most important things. But this is what it's actually doing. Then the really important step starts. This was just the prep. The really important step is then figuring out how to go from where you are to what you're supposed to be spending your time on.
And the goal is not to add 10 more hours to the pie.
That's right. And almost all the time you do an executive audit and you find out there are more hours somehow than there are hours in a week.
Or there's more hours in your time allocation than results that you're getting.
Yes. And, we've been focusing on the CEO role, but one really important application of this time audit is during an executive transition. So if an executive is somebody's being pulled into a new management director, VP, or executive role, or if you have been assigned a new responsibility, because one thing that happens 100% of the time is the old responsibilities, the old tasks, the old ways of doing things are still pulling you back. And you might find yourself a month or two in and you're still doing pieces of your old job, but that's not what you're supposed to be doing. And you know it, but you don't know why. You kind of can't quite figure out how that keeps happening. So the time audit, particularly important when something drastic and change is going on, so that you can make sure that instead of old things dragging your time and keeping you from focusing on the new, you have actually restructured your entire time. And this might mean telling people like, well, I'm no longer coming to this meeting. I'm in a new phase now. This is how my time is supposed to look like.
Well, let's add on to that for just a moment. It's not just when your role changes or your team changes, but if you bring on new technology, if there's a merger and acquisition, if there's a new product line, if a new competitor comes out of nowhere, if there's been a disruption in the supply chain, COVID hits.
Maybe you're moving headquarters.
Exactly. Any of these external events can have a serious, significant impact on an executive level's schedule.
That's right.
And you've got to shift on a dime.
Yeah. And I've noticed this in myself as well. Like I have a change going on right now in my business, and I'm still working like I was working 2 months ago. And it dawned on me as I was preparing this episode that this is actually a perfect time for me to do a time audit, because I really need to rethink how my time is going into the different products and services in my company. I've just sort of added things and kind of shifted some stuff around, but I haven't changed some of the cadences that were serving me 6 months ago. I have not changed my thoughts about how much time I need to be spending on different types of priorities and activities. And, once you have created your ideal time and you've now thought about which things need to get off your calendar, you also have to fill your calendar with the right things. And so what happens oftentimes at this time of change is you fill your calendar with the right kinds of meetings. So you have to put the right meetings on the table, remove the old meetings, create new cadences, and make sure that they're going to be aligned with the new stuff. But also create work blocks that align with new goals that are specifically dedicated to working on this and working on that. Because if you have a new product line that you're getting introduced and you don't have time blocks to be thinking about it, then the things that are operational will still continue to drag on you. And the people on your team who are maybe used to being able to pop into your office at this time and just get some feedback on the project they're working on, or they're going to continue doing that until you deliberately change how things move around in the office around you.
Absolutely. So while we're talking, you know how you kind of have like flashbacks go through your mind about things. So I've thought of 3 different episodes just this season that talk about how changes in your business, while you're scaling or while priorities change or external influences, how they all affect you as the entrepreneur, the business owner, or, one of the founders. They all affect you and you have to adapt. The executive time management is a huge part of it, also because all these other things hit. The first one I'm thinking about is the episode I did with Jim Curlin on goal setting. If you are trying to figure out your goals, and this is so closely aligned with executive time management, 2 great tools is the Eisenhower matrix, urgent, important, or some variation of the above. Well, once you do that audit, have you used that tool or others?
That's a great tool. I love the Eisenhower matrix. And I will say on goal setting, people talk about execution is king, right? So what that means is many people can set themselves some goals, but it's all about then delivering on them. Now, I don't want to undermine the importance of setting goals, because there are also people who maybe tend to get down into the execution and forget to set the next goal or figure out if they're on track with the goal or whatever. But you set the goals, but it doesn't, just because you set them, even if you wrote them on a whiteboard and look at them every day, that is not necessarily translate to action. But how your calendar is arranged, if you're in a team and you have a meeting and you need to be prepared for it, you're going to prepare for the meeting, you're going to go to the meeting, right? You're not skipping that meeting. So that meeting is like set on that calendar and it's driving you.
Yeah.
Right? And if it's a meeting that you should not be in, or it's a meeting that's not related to your new responsibilities anymore, and
get it out of there.
Right. Or it's a meeting that's not effective, or you're not talking about the goals, or you're preparing a lot, but nothing, then that has just replaced the goal that's on the whiteboard that you're responsible for. Right. So the goals are really important, and your time needs to be managed to them to drive the execution of those goals really well. And I think that's kind of sometimes a missing link that people just forget. They're like, they set the goals, and then the goals are up there and the work is over here and the meetings and the day-to-day.
Every task has to be directly related to what it is you're trying to accomplish, whether you're driving the meeting or your input is critical. One of the companies that I worked with, this was 2001, right around 9/11, actually. I was the only sales marketing director, and I was on every single client team. There were, I think, 12 client teams. In a 40-hour work week, I had 37 hours of meetings every week because I had to be in every meeting. Did I need to be? No. No. But was I allowed to decline a meeting? No. Biggest waste of time. That is not effective time management.
No, that's not. You have to know why you're there and what you're there to contribute.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you bring up a great point, which is, okay, sometimes you might have a wish for how your time would be managed, but not all these meetings are like, you're not responsible for, let's say you're a chief marketing officer or VP of marketing. But the CEO's meetings you need to attend. But, you can make a much stronger case for what you're supposed to be attending and how you're supposed to be using those meetings when you have done a real-time audit. Like, I have been in an executive meeting before where I had shown my time audit to the rest of the team. I was like, this is what's going on right now. Like, I'm not asking for pity. I just need you guys to know that this responsibility that I had in my previous role has not been reassigned. And I have continued fulfilling it. And it's a responsibility that takes up, like 30% of my time. So right now, we're 6 months into my transition. I'm supposed to be generating new revenue for the company, but I'm still responsible for something. Like, we need to figure out how that responsibility is going to be handed off, because it does not belong in this department. And in fact, there's a conflict of interest. right? So when you do that time audit, people will be pretty impressed with you. Like very few, larger companies maybe have that type of stuff that they do with their executives, but smaller companies are going to say, oh, someone should do my time audit now because I don't actually know where my time is going, right?
Another effective tool, depending on the relationship you have with whoever called the meeting, especially if it is a C-level CEO. Hey, I'm preparing for this meeting and I just want to make sure that I have available anything you want me to bring to the table. I'm fully prepared. What are your expectations for me out of this meeting? What deliverables would you like from me?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing. I just want your input. Fantastic. What particular input would you like from me so I can be prepared? Oh, nothing. I just want you to hear it. Great. Can I get a copy of the notes then?
Well, there's this really great case study from Amazon, the way Jeff Bezos likes to run his meetings. And maybe we'll see if we can find the link for the resources.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
And all the executives have to come in with like a pre-prepared 2-page document that is basically the script of what they're going to say. Now, that sounds very extreme. And everybody's got to read that script beforehand, right? That sounds very extreme. But what that demonstrates is a level of preparedness and an expectation for having your thoughts and goals clearly organized for every meeting, right? So that's very great technique. Question that. Meetings can be really, really valuable. If the right people are in them, you're focused on the goals altogether, everybody's prepared, people have read the things they're supposed to ahead of time. It can be vastly productive, but oftentimes people call a meeting when they don't know what to do.
Yeah, I just need some insight. Okay, well, that's what some of the Slack channels or Teams chats or whatever it is, use those tools. Mm-hmm. Use those tools. The other thing that we mentioned in Jim's episode was the concept of big rocks with Stephen Covey. Get the important stuff in there. Get that scheduled. So once you do your time audit, I'm assuming that the new and improved time audit, do you block those critical meetings and tasks first?
That's right. Yeah. So once you have looked at where you are versus where you need to be, right? There's going to be things you're going to need to be changing. So you have to figure out how you're going to address first the things that shouldn't be on your calendar, and then put the things that need to be on your calendar. And I think it's a great idea to try to align it as much as you can to either the way that you have your quarterly plan organized, so maybe in terms of workflows or key areas of focus. It can also be in terms of goals. I mean, how many times do we have a list of tasks, follow up with XYZ, follow up with Jim, follow up with Joe, and what does it relate to? Is the follow-up part of a revenue activity? Is this just something that you have like a guilt that you told somebody you were going to send them an article and you forgot and now you just feel horrible, but it doesn't actually they're probably
they forgot about it.
They forgot about it. They're probably happy you haven't emailed them. My point is that you're right. We need to make sure the things relate to the goals. So the big things do need to come on first. But I will note sometimes it's hard to just go straight from a goal, like make X amount of sales, right, to a time on the calendar. Like you're probably not calling it like $10 million of sales on the calendar, right? But it might be time when it's follow up with critical clients, right? Like goal 1, right? So you could relate. Those things need to relate for sure, but I wouldn't necessarily say you have to name it after your biggest goals, because we also need time for email, whatever that email may be, even if it's not related to, you have to at least delete it from your calendar, from your inbox. So we have to have some of that time. And this also for people who are doing work-life balance, maybe people who have children or people who have something serious they're doing after work as well. This level of deliberate calendar control, right? And making your calendar transparent and saying I'm out here, I'm doing calls here. This is my open office time. Team can come in with whatever questions. I'll just be kind of checking my email. I can also check in with you. That deliberate transparency about a calendar now sets expectations for how other people interact with you. If you're out at 4:30 on this day, you got kids' soccer practice, whatever, that can be on your calendar as an explicit statement about how you're managing that time. And then that can become an expectation. And then nobody's coming into your office at 4:25 with last minute on fire things. Or maybe it says like call in the car, right? So that calendar purposefulness can translate into really good habits for the rest of the team and much easier communication about where, because, when you're a manager, everybody's looking for you and wants something. And so you are now providing people both with the opportunity to come in at the right time and to not come in at a time when it's going to create frustration. You're going to forget about it. You're not going to be able to get it done. And it's, that's not a great scenario either.
Absolutely. So you had mentioned when there's transition of personnel within the company, promotions, lateral moves, whatever the case may be. Carol Fraser is a guest I frequently had on Office Hours. She just recently had her episode post on Go, Go, Grow as well. And she often says, anytime you add one employee to your company, your business changes. The culture changes. And of course, like you referred to, responsibilities change and have to be reallocated. So think about that when you have that transition of responsibilities. If you don't transition some of those responsibilities, that wreaks havoc on your calendar. And that time audit's so critical to uncover that, like you just showed.
Yeah, I've had really good results using this in one-on-one coaching with executives. I've had a great use of it in my own business. It's really helped me during critical times of transition in my roles and in my business. And I will also note I've used this. I haven't taught like the time audit in this detail to students, but when I was co-teaching a class at University of Virginia focused on preparing undergraduate students for graduation and professionalism in the workforce, we did talk about being deliberate with time and kind of at least thinking through, a lot of them are going to be in much more like individual contributor roles, maybe working one or two projects to start. So they're not necessarily in this kind of ambiguous, you will get to set the time kind of role yet. But we did talk about how to be more deliberate, how to think about your time more specifically, and to take kind of note of where your time is going, both personally and professionally, and where your energy is being spent. That's important too. And that was also very helpful to the students there. And I've had great feedback on teaching that as well. So time management is a great topic. And it's not something that just because you've graduated and you have gone on and now you've got 20 years under your belt, it doesn't mean that the next big thing that challenges you isn't going to challenge your time management skills as well. It will.
Right.
It will challenge every time you grow in scope of work. You're going to have to rethink your time, and you're going to have to become even better at managing this tremendous scope.
Right.
And that might include delegation and other skills that we didn't really cover here, but very, very valuable tool to have in your toolbox.
And if you learn effective time management at the level of the student or early in your career, and then you become an executive or you become a business owner and you are in charge of either contributing to or leading the culture of an organization, being an effective time manager, and like you said, being deliberate rather than emergent with your time, that has a huge impact on the culture of an organization. So referring back to Carol's episode, that is a big impact, and we'll have you refer back to that as well. So the last thing I want to kind of to tap into with you is, we've talked a lot about strategic planning and how that is so important to this. And I want to refer the audience back to a couple of episodes that we've done on strategic planning. I think the one we did, season 1, was one of my favorites with you. And I want to make sure everybody has a link to that. But what types of services, programs, courses do you have either individually or as a service offering that we can refer our listeners to learn more about how you can help them?
Perfect. So I have kind of 3 categories of services, you could say. I've got the do it for you almost. And this is where I can come in as a consultant and I can work with your team to implement strategic planning across the company. So companies that are very young, maybe don't do it as much. They kind of just have good team meetings. But when you get to be the size of 50 people and above, it can really help to be a little bit more deliberate, set a schedule around this, have expectations, have templates. And it takes some time to put all of this together. And not everybody has done this type of planning before. So it can be really helpful to have somebody come in and work with the executive team to implement the practice. Oftentimes, this is a responsibility that a COO has, but it's not always in the COO's tool set. Sometimes I've met in manufacturing companies, the COO tends to be more focused on the operations of the manufacturing, for example. So they're less focused on like strategic planning or cadences across the company. So that's kind of the do it for you. And then I have a do it with you, which is a class I do. So you enroll your executive team into the class, and I work with them both as a group and as individuals. I teach them how to do quarterly planning. Specifically, we just focus on quarterly planning. The reason I do this is because quarterly planning is much easier to just get started. And I think momentum is so important to strategic planning. Once you are in the cadence of doing quarterly planning, annual planning becomes so much easier.
Agreed.
Doing an annual plan is very, very hard, and it can be taxing to the team. And starting from scratch, it just seems overwhelming. So we start with 90-day plans. And I teach this really fun methodology that I've used in a small business before, where we don't have to use Excel Gantt charts. We don't have to use project management software. We do it all on like whiteboards and sticky notes, which sounds like a gimmick. But the point here is you get started very fast to have a 90-day plan that's visible to the entire team. It's completely transparent. In fact, your team, mostly the team, creates the plan. And over time, you train them to work with you to create it on a regular basis and to grade themselves against it. So there's accountability. And so that I do with small teams, typically 3 to 5 people in a company. It's about 6 to 8 weeks. We personalize it to the size of the company.
And that's the kind of plan that's interactive and collaborative. That's the one that's going to work.
And the last is the do-it-yourself. And so I have a free lead magnet. I have a document on the Agile Planning course site, which is kind of a 5-step process. It describes how the steps you would need to take to come up with a 90-day plan and turn it into also a time audit. So it connects these 2 concepts together so that you can, if you're just like, hey, I just want to try this out. I'm not ready for a course. I want to see if this would work for me. It talks you through step by step and has a couple templates and frameworks in there that you can use starting now.
That's awesome. So if you are either struggling with your executive time management, if you're being very reactive, treating things as emergent needs rather than being deliberate, this is the information you need. This is the coaching you need. Again, she's brilliant. She can help you. So we'll have links to all of that in the show notes. And of course, contact information for Dasha as well. And we'll have links to all the other resources and references that we mentioned. Dasha, any other words of wisdom for us or any other wrap-ups?
Well, I love what you said about culture of a company and the time management, how good it is when that translates. And I think, it comes down to respect as well as discipline. You also want to make sure you're respecting yourself with the time that you arrange, that you're respecting your employees and giving them opportunity to have work-life balance. And all of this really comes down to having a better work life as well, right? To have better work is to have better life, because that's where we spend a lot of our time. So I love that it relates to culture and to flourishing of a company and an individual. I'm so grateful to be on the show again. Michelle, it's been amazing to see its growth.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the collaboration we had when we started it together and where it's led both of us individually and together. You are still one of my dearest friends and one of my most important collaborators. So thank you for being you.
Michelle, thank you for being you.
It's a love fest. So thank you for joining us on Go, Go, Grow. If you are looking to grow your business, scale your company, or just learn more, tune into the next episode. Check out Dasha and StratCraft and go, go, grow. Have a great day.